Agents Stipe and Lubinsky travel to the desert to meet with a Mexican couple. After scanning their home for potential danger, they attempt to speak with the husband, who only repeats the word rebirth. He hands the agents his rosary but does not answer any questions. His wife claims that he was once blind, but is no longer so. Then she leads them to the location where something fell from the sky and caused all of this. Meanwhile, mechanic David is visiting his deceased wife's grave, informing her that their daughter will be visiting soon. He then drives to work, listening to the news to stay up to date on the status of the ongoing conflict. The mechanics at the garage are idle because the current economic crisis has left them with few customers. David refuses to give up, but his boss says it's over. Suddenly, veteran Zach shows up looking for work, and David is forced to decline. That night, David goes to the bar and overhears an edgy man insult the American military. Zach becomes irritated and calls him out, so the guy simply takes Zach's drink and follows him outside. Knowing the man plays dirty, David follows them out and discovers Zach is surrounded by a gang. 2 guys are holding him while the edgy man beats him up. They don't stop when David asks them to, so he joins the fight, but he and Zach are quickly overpowered and bleeding. During the struggle, the gang accidentally pulls off Zach's fake leg and discovers he is disabled, so they flee. David gives Zach his leg back and offers him a ride. After a tense conversation, Zach is dropped off at his rehab center. Then David gets home and realizes he is late for his own birthday. His daughter Annabelle has been waiting with cake, but she also has bad news. She has had to drop out of college because David's last 2 payments did not go through. David promises to get the money soon, but Annabelle does not want him to work too hard and ends the conversation with an engraved watch as a gift. David wants to drink to forget, but there is no alcohol left in the house. He gets in his car to buy more and is startled to see a fiery ball in the sky rapidly falling toward the road. David tries to move the car away, but ends up falling off the road into a forest ditch. After a few minutes of bleeding, David regains consciousness and notices someone walking nearby. Ignoring his pain, he begins following the woman, who whispers his name in a familiar tone. However, David's wounds are too severe, and he continues to fall. The next morning, Annabelle discovers her father has not returned and becomes concerned when he does not answer his phone. She contacts the police, but they inform her that 24 hours must pass before it is considered a missing person. Annabelle continues to search the area, eventually discovering the crashed vehicle in the ditch, but David is not present. Night falls, but Annabelle perseveres, using a flashlight to search every inch of the forest. When her batteries die, she returns to her car and begins to cry. However, when she starts the car, the lights show David standing in the middle of the road. Later in the hospital, David awakens to find the same woman speaking to him. Meanwhile, the doctor informs Annabelle that they've discovered something strange. The records show David donated a kidney to his wife before she died, which Annabelle confirms. However, the new X-rays show he now has both kidneys. David is allowed to return home, but he can't stop thinking about the woman, so he decides to sit outside in his wife's old chair and reflect on what happened the night before. While following the mysterious person, David fell into a crater where the object in the sky was glowing. Suddenly, that object sprouted vines, grabbing David's arm. After Annabelle has fallen asleep, David looks out the window and hears his name again. He follows the noise into the forest, where he is shocked to see his wife Jane. They hug and say sweet words before Jane gives him a vision. There will be a nuclear war, and David must build something to protect their daughter. When David returns home and learns from the news that the war is worsening, he decides to go to the barn and begin making plans. Meanwhile, Stipe and Lubinsky are arguing with their boss, who believes that looking for alien rocks is a waste of time during a war. But they ignored them because Stipe believes alien technology can help them win the war. The agents then go to the lab and receive bad news. The specimen they brought from the desert has died. These aliens appeared to be unable to withstand high temperatures. Stipe, desperate for clues, orders the doctor to open up the Mexican man and Lubinsky to inform his wife that he died of a cardiac arrest. The next day, Annabelle continues to cry as she watches family videos at home. David takes Jane's old truck and drives to the rehabilitation center to offer Zach a job. Both men travel to the forest, with David leaving Zach in charge of the winch before heading to the cave. To his surprise, grass had begun to grow around the alien object. He connects the winch to it to drag it out, and Zach assists him in getting it to the back of the track. When David returns home, he spends the entire day in the barn building and planning. Meanwhile, at the rehab center, Zach feels something strange and examines his leg stump, only to find a strange protuberance growing on it. The next day, Zach and his fellow veterans participate in an anti-war protest in front of an army office. As Zach walks away, he notices that his leg stump is bleeding. At the barn, David notices some damage to the alien object and realizes it was caused by sunlight. Suddenly, Zach appears, demanding to know what happened to him. Moments later, Annabelle arrives and notices the blood in the front yard. Panicking, she rushes inside and discovers her father tending Zach on the couch. She believes they should take him to the hospital, but David refuses and uncovers Zach's lap, revealing that his leg is slowly regrowing, just like David's kidney. This confirms that the alien object possesses healing abilities. David tells Annabelle to take care of Zach and drives away in the truck. In the evening, the agents hear rumors about an alien object that crashed in David's city. Lubinsky believes they should follow orders and abandon the search, but Stipe is adamant and says they will look into this new clue. David returns with 2 tanks of cooling gas and announces that they are taking Zach to the barn. Annabelle assists him in moving him, and David immediately places the gas around the alien object to keep it fresh. Next, they sit Zach next to it, and the object immediately wraps its vines around his arm, causing the leg to grow in seconds. Annabelle takes a step back from a curious vine reaching for her and passes out at the sight of the leg. Annabelle has a dream while unconscious about being alone with her mother when she dies. She wakes up in the morning to find Zach walking outside with 2 perfectly good legs. He can't believe what's happening, and he's overjoyed. Then Annabelle and Zach meet David at the barn, where he has finished designing a bunker-like capsule to protect against an unstoppable tragedy. Annabelle fears her father is losing control, but he insists she can trust him. After that, David visits his friend Tony at the junkyard, but he only buys a small amount of metal. Then they go to the bar where David tricked Tony into drinking until he passed out. He leaves Tony in his car before taking his keys, which he uses to enter the junkyard with Zach and steal all of the materials required for the capsule. They even accept a full mixer truck. Everything is transported to an abandoned factory where they can work discreetly. While driving down the forest road, they notice the agents searching the area. The next morning, Tony wakes up to find the keys in his pocket as usual. The agents discover a crater in the forest, only contains a small alien sample. The local sheriff directs them to find David, explaining that he crashed here a few nights ago, but did not sustain any injuries. The sample is taken to the lab, where scientists explain that the alien object contains DNA from various plants and animals, including humans. They conclude that this is a living example of abiogenesis, the natural process that causes life to emerge from non-living matter. At the factory, David and Zach work hard on the capsule, which they create with the cement mixer and protect with steel. They place the alien object inside to keep it safe. Meanwhile, Annabelle visits Jane's grave and realizes she needs to do more to move on, but is interrupted by agents searching for David. The agents remain in the house until David returns to question him. David lies, claiming that he has no memory of what happened after the car accident, other than seeing a light in the sky that caused him to lose control. Stipe reveals that he is aware of the regrown kidney and shows them photos of the Mexican man, claiming that he too believed he had been healed, but is now deceased. David decides to take the agents to the barn and show them where he previously kept the object, claiming that the sun melted it. The agents discover a stain on the ground and pretend to believe David before departing. Later, Annabelle warns David that this is becoming too dangerous. He claims Jane showed him a global tragedy, and Annabelle snaps. The agents will follow David the next time he visits the factory. David notices and calls a friend for a favor, then begins driving in circles around town. Moments later, the agents successfully block his path, but it turns out to be David's friend. The agents are furious that they lost David and decide to turn Annabelle against him. Meanwhile, Tony's boss has discovered his truck is missing and discovered the robbery on security footage, but he cannot see any faces. Zach is still working on the capsule at the factory, watching the vines grow inside. When he returns home, Annabelle is there because she needs someone to talk to, and she explains how David stopped visiting Jane, and she is now concerned that he is losing his mind again. The agents surround Zach and Annabelle as they make their way out. Tony pays David a visit at the factory. He freaks out when he sees all of the stolen goods so he calls the cops. David panics and jumps on Tony to try to steal his phone. A desperate David kicks him off, and Tony crashes into the table. When David takes a closer look, he is devastated to discover Tony has hit his head and is now dead. After hearing Jane's voice, David burns the body. Then he checks inside the capsule and discovers that the vines have spread all over the walls. Suddenly, he sees himself dancing. Jane explains that the capsule was never intended for him. It is for Annabelle and Zach. At home, the agents have Annabelle and Zach handcuffed. The news continues to show the state of the war. Stipe uses pretty words to get them to talk, but they both remain silent. As Stipe begins to beat Zach up, David returns and cautiously sneaks around his house. The guards at the entrance inform the agents inside the house, and Stipe dispatches Lubinsky to investigate. David can now sneak into the house and threaten Stipe with his gun. He forces him to drop the handcuff keys and turn around, allowing Annabelle to strike him in the head with the poker and knock him out. The trio escapes through the window. At that point, Lubinsky returns and hands Stipe his rifle, which he uses to shoot Annabelle in a non-lethal location. This is Stipe's strategy. He knows David will want to heal Annabelle, so he and Lubinsky immediately begin following them. Lubinsky believes they have crossed a line, but Spite insists that anything is fair in order to prevent a nuclear war. As soon as they arrive at the factory, David puts Annabelle inside the capsule, but no healing occurs, and he loses his mind again. David, believing he has worked for nothing and hearing the agents outside, begins throwing gas at the capsule and pulling out his lighter, unaware that the vines are finally reaching out to Annabelle. At that point, the agents enter and ask him not to do it. David refuses to extinguish the flame, but is interrupted by a healed Annabelle poking her head out. Now David does close his lighter, only for Spite to shoot him down. Suddenly, an earthquake strikes the area, and a bright light appears in the distance. The first nuclear bombs have fallen, and the situation will only worsen from here. People from all over the country came out of their homes to watch the explosion. In the factory, David instructs Zach to take care of Annabelle before forcing him to enter the capsule. Then he apologizes to his daughter for leaving her and presses a button to seal the capsule shut. As more explosions are heard in the distance, Spite begs David to open the capsule, but he refuses. At that point, the alien object begins filling the capsule with water. Annabelle and Zach are initially alarmed, but as the water completely covers them, the object emits flakes that freeze the liquid and put the two in cryogenic sleep. At the same time, David dies and Jane greets him in the afterlife. Nuclear bombs are still being detonated around the world. Eventually, the capsule opens and Annabelle and Zach awaken. Plants have grown over it, and the metal has rusted, but the outside is nothing but ruins. It seems like centuries have passed. All right, that's a wrap for today. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. It really helps the channel. Leave a comment with your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching and see you next time.